My boyfriend accepted me knowing I had 2 children. But now he wants to break up with me because I don't want him to bring his daughter. I'm not here to take care of another woman's children. I've always been a woman who knows what she brings to the table, and for the last year, I thought Mark, my partner, finally understood that too. When we met, I was very clear about my life. I have 2 children, Leo and Sarah, who are my absolute world and the center of my universe. Mark stepped into the role of a father figure with a level of enthusiasm that, frankly, I expected from any man lucky enough to be part of our lives. He plays with them, handles the math homework I don't have the patience for, and treats them with a level of care that I considered the bare minimum for entering a pre-existing family. For 12 months, our home has been a sanctuary of order and impeccable standards because I don't settle for chaos. I have worked tirelessly to ensure that every pillow is fluffed and every routine is followed to the second. Everything was going perfectly until a few days ago when Mark decided to drop a literal bomb on our peaceful existence. He came home looking all frazzled and claimed that his ex-wife had some kind of medical emergency and wouldn't be able to care for their daughter. He had the absolute nerve to look me in the eye and say that his 7-year-old daughter Lily needed to move in with us for several months. I sat there in silence for a moment, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. He actually expected me to just open my doors to a child I barely know and disrupt the perfect flow I've built for Leo and Sarah. The sheer lack of respect for the environment I've curated in this house was honestly staggering. I didn't scream or make a scene, even though I had every right to, because I am a rational person who values stability. I explained to him, as calmly as one can when being insulted, that I simply didn't sign up to be a nanny for another woman's child. My children are stable, their routine is sacred, and adding a third, foreign element into the mix would be a disaster for their mental health. Mark looked at me like I had grown a second head, which I found incredibly offensive given how much I do for this family. He tried to argue that he takes care of my kids every single day, but that is a completely different situation. He chose to date a woman with children. He knew what he was getting into from the very first date. I never made a promise to take on his baggage or the consequences of his failed past marriage just because he stepped up for mine. The sacrifices he makes for Leo and Sarah are part of the price of admission for being with a woman of my caliber. To suggest that I owe him the same labor for a child that isn't mine is a massive reach and honestly quite sexist. I keep this house looking like a museum, a feat that requires constant vigilance and a very specific type of energy. Bringing a 7-year-old girl into this environment would ruin the aesthetic, the peace and the focus I give to my own flesh and blood. Mark just kept shaking his head, acting like I was being unreasonable for protecting my territory. The conversation went downhill from there because he refused to see the logic in my boundaries. He started talking about responsibility and family, but he was completely ignoring the fact that I am the one who manages the domestic sphere here. I told him straight up that if he wanted to play hero for his ex-wife, he should do it on his own time and not at the expense of my sanity. He had the audacity to suggest that his daughter is part of him, and therefore should be part of our home. I reminded him that my home is a carefully balanced ecosystem that doesn't have room for invasive species. He didn't appreciate the metaphor, which just proves how little he understands the work I put in. By the end of the night, the atmosphere in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark was being incredibly cold, retreating into himself as if I were the one who had done something wrong. I am the one who should be offended that he even thought it was okay to ask such a thing of me. He knows how hard I work to keep everything impeccable, yet he's willing to throw it all away for a temporary situation with his ex. It's the ultimate betrayal of the partnership we've built, or at least the one I thought we had. I've spent a year making him feel like a king in this castle, and this is how he repays my dedication. Instead of apologizing for his outburst, Mark had the gall to look me in the eye and say, "Maybe we aren't as compatible as I thought." I was floored by the manipulation in that statement, trying to threaten our relationship just because I won't be his unpaid childcare. He's acting as if I'm the villain for having standards and for refusing to let our lives be turned upside down. It's classic gaslighting, trying to make me feel guilty for prioritizing the children who actually live here and pay the price of his absence. I'm not going to be bullied into changing my mind about the sanctity of my home. If he can't appreciate a woman who sets firm boundaries, then he clearly doesn't deserve the life I've provided for him. I've been walking on eggshells in my own house ever since, which is completely unfair given that I've done nothing but be honest. He's still acting like the victim, sighing and moping around like I've asked him to do something impossible. All I've asked is that he respects the impeccable nature of our living situation and keeps his external problems where they belong, outside. My children haven't noticed much yet, but I can feel the shift in energy, and I blame him entirely for the tension. He's the one who brought this conflict into our sanctuary, and now he's punishing me for not being a doormat. It's exhausting being the only adult in the room who understands how to maintain a high-quality lifestyle. I truly believe he just needs some time to realize how ridiculous he's being. He's probably just stressed about his ex-wife, but that doesn't give him the right to take it out on me or my household. I've been staying busy, deep cleaning the kitchen and reorganizing the pantry to maintain some sense of control while he sulks. It's pathetic, really, that a man can't see the value of a woman who protects her family's peace at all costs. I'm waiting for the apology I deserve, but so far all I'm getting is silence and cold looks. He'll come around once he realizes that no other woman is going to keep a home as perfect as I do. I'm standing my ground because if I give an inch now, he'll think he can walk all over me forever. This isn't just about a 7-year-old girl. It's about the principle of the thing and who has the final say in our domestic life. I am the manager of this home, and my no should be the end of the discussion, period. Mark needs to decide if he wants a life with a high-value woman or if he wants to be a full-time babysitter for his past. I've already made my choice, and I'm just waiting for him to catch up to reality. It's honestly disappointing that I even have to explain this to someone who claims to love me. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says so. Wait. Mark treats your kids like his own, does their homework and pays the bills, but you won't even let his daughter stay for a few months during an emergency? That is the definition of a double standard. Ops reply: Mark chose to date a mother and accepted that responsibility as part of the package deal. I am a mother to my own kids, not a volunteer for his ex-wife's mistakes or his poor planning. Anonymous user 2 says, I can't imagine how much work it is to keep a house impeccable with 2 kids. People really don't understand that adding another child isn't just one more. It's a total destruction of the system you've built. Ops reply: exactly. Finally, someone who gets it. Adding a strange child to the mix would ruin the flow I've perfected for my family, and I refuse to let my hard work go to waste for someone else's convenience. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the atmosphere in this house has become practically toxic, thanks to Mark's ongoing stubbornness. He's still moping around like a teenager, completely ignoring the fact that I am the one keeping this entire ship afloat while he wallows in self-pity. To protect the balance of the house and ensure there are no further misunderstandings about my expectations, I decided to take action. I spent the afternoon drafting and printing out a formal household peace agreement to clarify our living arrangements. I've lived here long enough to know that personal space and clearly defined boundaries are the only things that keep a modern family from falling apart. I sat Mark down and presented him with the document, explaining that since Lily isn't on the lease, her staying here for more than 48 hours would be a violation of our legal agreement. I even took the time to cite the importance of mental health for Leo and Sarah, noting that an extra person would cause unnecessary stress. I expected him to at least try to negotiate or acknowledge the effort I put into the legal research, but he didn't even argue. He just stared at the paper and then looked at me with a look I can't quite describe. It was almost like he was looking at a complete stranger. It was incredibly rude, considering I was only trying to provide a structured framework for our impeccable home to continue functioning. After he finished reading my well-thought-out agreement, he didn't say a single word of appreciation for the clarity I provided. Instead, he just stood up, grabbed a pillow and a blanket, and moved himself to the couch as if he were the one being persecuted. I didn't stop him because, frankly, if he wants to be a martyr, that's his choice, and it certainly makes the bed more comfortable for me. As long as he respects the rules of the house I manage, he can sleep on the floor for all I care. It's just more proof that he's unable to handle a mature, boundary-driven relationship without throwing a tantrum. I'm still the one doing the dishes and ensuring the kids are happy while he's acting like I've committed a crime. I'm honestly shocked that he's choosing to be this dramatic over a simple request for organization and respect. Most men would be grateful to have a woman who takes the initiative to handle the boring legal and logistical details of the household. I'm protecting his interests too, though he's too blinded by his daddy guilt to see that right now. If the landlord found out we had an unauthorized long-term guest, we could all be evicted, but Mark doesn't seem to care about that. He's too busy playing the sad dad role to realize I'm actually the one saving our lifestyle. I'll keep the agreement on the fridge as a reminder that this house has rules that must be followed. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says using a lease argument and a printed peace agreement against your own partner's child is beyond extreme. It's cold, calculating, and honestly a bit scary how you can detach emotion from a child in need. App's reply, it's called protecting my territory and my children's stability. If I don't set firm boundaries now, who will protect my family from being pushed around by everyone else's emergencies? Anonymous user 2 says, I think Mark is finally realizing exactly who he's been living with this whole time. That look he gave you wasn't confusion. It was the aha moment where he realized he's dating a robot. App's reply, he's realizing he has a woman who finally knows her worth and won't be pushed around by anyone's emotional manipulation. If that makes me a robot for being organized, then so be it. Update 2. It's been 1 week since my last update, and things have taken a truly bizarre and honestly insulting turn in this household. Instead of finally coming to his senses and respecting the impeccable boundaries I worked so hard to establish, Mark did something completely irrational. He spent the last few days quietly packing a bag. And yesterday, he actually took Lily and checked into a long-stay hotel across town. He had the nerve to tell me with a completely straight face that he needed to prioritize his child's safety and well-being. Can you even believe the level of drama this man is capable of just to avoid following a few simple house rules? He's basically abandoning the family he actually lives with. The one that includes me and my 2 children for a girl he usually only sees every other weekend. It's incredibly selfish of him to prioritize a temporary situation over the stability of the home we've shared for a year. My kids, Leo and Sarah, keep asking where Uncle Mark is and why he isn't coming home for dinner, and it breaks my heart. I've had to be honest with them and explain that Mark is being selfish and choosing his own wants over our family's needs. I shouldn't have to clean up the emotional mess he's leaving behind just because he couldn't handle a peace agreement. I sent him a very firm text message explaining that his little personal space experiment is actively hurting my children and disrupting our routine. I reminded him that he has a responsibility to this house and to the kids who look up to him, but his response was the height of arrogance. He just replied that he was following the boundaries I established, and that since he was a non-permanent resident, according to my logic, he was staying elsewhere. The irony is completely lost on him, of course, because he's using my own words to justify his desertion. He's trying to twist my words to make me look like the bad guy when he's the one who walked out the door. The house feels strangely empty, which is a bit of a relief in terms of cleaning, but the financial and logistical burden is starting to weigh on me. Mark usually handles the heavy lifting around here, both literally and figuratively, and his absence is a direct attack on my quality of life. He's clearly doing this to punish me for standing my ground, thinking I'll beg him to come back and bring the chaos with him. He doesn't realize that I'm a woman of iron will, and I won't be manipulated by his disappearing act. If he wants to waste money on a hotel room while his bed at home is perfectly made, that's his financial funeral. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says you literally told him his daughter wasn't welcome and cited the lease to keep her out. Now he's out and his daughter is with him. You got exactly what you wanted, so why are you so angry? App's reply, I wanted her out of this house, not for him to stop being a provider and a presence here. He's supposed to be a partner, and walking out is a total dereliction of his duties to me and my kids. Anonymous user 2 says don't you dare blame him for abandoning your kids when you were the one who effectively kicked his child to the curb. You're using your children as pawns to make him feel guilty for being a good father. App's reply, I didn't kick anyone out. I simply enforced the lease rules for the sake of the house's impeccable standards. If Mark can't balance his responsibilities, that is entirely his failure as a man, not mine. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the situation has reached a point where I felt I had to take a definitive stand to protect my interests. Since Mark clearly isn't interested in being a functioning part of this household or helping with the bills while he plays hotel dad, I decided to look out for myself. I contacted our landlord, who happens to be an old college friend of Mark's, to discuss the unstable environment Mark has created. I explained that since Mark had voluntarily vacated the premises and was no longer contributing to the daily maintenance, it was only fair to remove him from the lease. I figured if he's so obsessed with his personal space in a hotel, he shouldn't have any legal claim to the home I work so hard to maintain. I was very professional about it, highlighting how Mark's sudden departure was confusing for my children and putting our domestic stability at risk. I assumed the landlord would see reason and realize that I am the one actually living in the unit, keeping it clean and impeccable every single day. I told him that I wanted to officially transition the lease into my name only so that Mark couldn't just come and go as he pleases. I was sure this move would show Mark that there are real-world consequences for abandoning his responsibilities and trying to use my boundaries against me. It was a power move, yes, but a necessary one for a woman in my position. I haven't heard back from the landlord yet, but I'm confident that my logic is sound and that business is business at the end of the day. Mark is the one who left after all, and I shouldn't have to live in fear that he might try to move back in on his own terms. I've already started looking into how I can rearrange the guest room to better suit my kids' needs now that the daughter threat is gone. It's empowering to finally take total control of my environment without having to consult someone who clearly doesn't value my contributions. I'm a reliable tenant, and any landlord with a brain would prefer me over someone who lives in a hotel. Mark has been totally silent, which just goes to show how little he actually cares about the family he claimed to love so much. He hasn't even checked in to see if I need help with the rent or the groceries, which is incredibly low even for him. I'm managing just fine, obviously, because I'm resourceful, but it's the principle of the matter that continues to irritate me. He thinks he can just opt out of his life here and still keep a toe in the door, but I'm shutting that door and locking it. Once the lease is officially mine, he'll have to realize that I'm the one who holds all the cards in this relationship. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says this is absolute insanity. They're trying to steal his home and cut him off from a lease he probably pays for, all because he chose to take care of his daughter during an emergency? You are truly a piece of work. Ops reply, it's my home too, and I'm the one actually living in it and keeping it impeccable while he's off playing house in a hotel. I'm just making the legal reality match the physical one. Anonymous user 2 says if the landlord is actually Mark's friend, this is going to end spectacularly badly for you. You just handed Mark the perfect excuse to get rid of you entirely, and you're too blinded by your own ego to see it. Ups reply, business is business, and friendships shouldn't matter when it comes to a reliable tenant like me. Mark is the one who left the property. I'm just the one cleaning up the mess he left behind. Update 4. It's been 1 month since my last update, and I am currently writing this from the guest room of my mother's house, surrounded by boxes. It turns out that the very boundary I pushed so hard for, the one about only permanent residence on the lease, having rights, was my ultimate undoing. When I contacted the landlord to try and remove Mark, it backfired in the most spectacular and unfair way possible. Instead of siding with me, the landlord called Mark immediately, and they had a long conversation about the unstable environment I had mentioned. It turns out that Mark was the primary signer and the only one whose income actually qualified us for the place to begin with. The landlord didn't remove Mark from the lease. Instead, he informed me that Mark had given formal notice to terminate the lease entirely, because I had insisted so loudly that those not staying here shouldn't be on the paperwork. Mark simply took me at my word. He decided that since he was no longer staying there, he had no obligation to keep paying for a roof over my head or maintain a lease for a woman who didn't want his child. He essentially reclaimed his financial freedom and his credit score, leaving me with 30 days to find a new place that I can't afford. The level of spite required to leave a woman and 2 children homeless is something I never thought Mark was capable of. When I tried to call him to explain that he was taking things way too far, he was colder than ice. He told me that since I felt so strongly about personal space and excluding non-essential people, he decided to simplify his life to just the essentials, himself and Lily. I tried to argue that I was just being a protective mother and that my impeccable house was for the benefit of our family, but he didn't care. He just looked at me during the final walkthrough and said, "I'm being a protective parent too, Elena." He had the nerve to use my own dedication to my kids as a weapon against me, as if his situation were even remotely comparable to mine. So now my impeccable house is gone, replaced by a cramped room at my mother's where Sarah has to sleep on a trundle bed. I'm beyond indignant at the way I've been treated after a year of giving that man a perfect, orderly life. Mark essentially destroyed our entire future because he couldn't handle a little bit of structure or a peace agreement that was for his own good. He chose to throw away a high-value woman and a ready-made family just because his ego was bruised by a few boundaries. It's a tragedy, honestly, that a man can be so short-sighted and cruel to the person who did everything right for her kids. I'm the one suffering the consequences of his lack of character, and I will never forgive him for failing to live up to the standard I set.